Post-combat, now entering second main phase.
Hello and welcome in everyone to the second main phase, a competitive Magic the Gathering podcast brought to you by Team Main Phase and our wonderful sponsors, the Manivault and Kangaroo Tales. I am one of your hosts. My name is Jason Cornell, and I am joined with always by Doug Bailey. How we doing? How's it going? What's up? How we feeling?
Still recovering from the trip to Cincinnati. Kind of a
Oh, yeah,
disappointing weekend, but
did we do that? No, we didn't do that, right? We did. We did actually go to Cincinnati.
we drove to Cincinnati from
Oh,
Houston
don't
because
tell
we're
the people that. Don't
degens.
tell the people that. They don't need to know that.
We
That's a
are.
terrible decision.
It was a terrible decision.
For those who don't know, Houston to Cincinnati is kind of far.
18 hours.
A little far. I mean, we broke it up. We did a little bit. It wasn't just straight there. We made a pit stop and picked up some friends along the way, I guess. But I still don't recommend it. Let's not do that.
It's a couple days after returning, and I'm still just mentally
Yes.
and physically and emotionally, spiritually drained. Just
Yeah, I still don't feel like I've had enough sleep somehow. Like I just feel so sleep deprived for like 4 or 5 days. But anywho,
the
so we
show must go on.
absolutely we've got to get the content out there for the people. The people, Doug.
Content.
So we did go to Cincinnati. I guess we can give everybody kind of a quick recap what happened there. Anything exciting?
Nope, just kind of a bad weekend. Went 4-3-1 on the weekend, four color. Definitely there's some decisions that mattered that I could have made, but didn't. There was a match, the second mirror of the day. I should have probably conceded, stay out of the draw bracket. My hubris said I was in a winning position. He should concede, so I'm not going to concede. Obviously, I played two more mirrors, ended up playing four mirrors in 8 rounds. Just kind of rough. I think one of the only highlights from the weekend is I somehow won on a mold of 4.
Yeah, that game
When I
was
kept
crazy.
7. Yeah. I survived at 2 life where my opponent had a Professor Delian emblem. And if he had any way to gain 2 life, I'd just lose the game on the spot. He also surgicaled my Jeskai Revs. So all I had were my 2 Emeritus of Ideations. And I somehow stole that game and then won game 3 with 2 minutes left on the clock. Other than that, everything else was terrible.
Yeah.
I don't think I played terribly. There were some micro decisions that mattered that cost games. Definitely my last round where I picked up my third loss against Momo. I could have played a lot differently. But I definitely got kind of rattled by the clock. So I don't know if I'm playing four color in DC yet. I should probably start listening to my teammate and play Mardu. And so far, the testing with Mardu has been pretty good.
Yeah, spoiler, Martyr is still really good.
Yeah, I mean, it had a poor win rate in the U.S. in particular. I think somewhere around 47, and then in Canada was like 53 for like a aggregate total of almost exactly 50%. I mean, Momo is really your only awful, like polarizing matchup. Everything else is pretty solid. So it seems like a good option.
Yeah, trying to decide whether you want to take a loss or a draw in spots like that is kind of awkward. Like it's day one, the draw is kind of pretty close to the same thing as a loss. So I can understand, just do I just concede, but it also feels bad. Like you also feel like if you're in that, I'm ahead, I've got, way more resources. If we had 2 minutes, 3 more minutes, I'm winning this game, 95% of the time. But that's a tough spot to be in. But yeah, once you take the draw, you're so much more likely to get paired into controlled X. And if somebody's already slow, they're already taking draws. That's a kind of just a tough position to put yourself in for a tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I did everything else correctly in that matchup. I when I saw the writing on the wall, I could have been winning, and game 1 was low. I conceded pretty early to try to get the game 2. So I just tried to play as fast as possible. My opponent was obviously playing slower and try to play slower lines to get a win for the one win. But he kind of punted game 2. He took an aggressive line where he shouldn't have, got punished, and I was able to steal it. And then game 3, I just needed a minute. And I thought I was shuffling real fast. I was making decisions pretty quickly.
Mhm.
Um, but it is what it is.
Yep.
We can't always have amazing tournaments. This is, not day twoing after a couple of good day two performances and good finishes and other tournaments kind of stings and
Yep.
definitely give me a lot of fuel for DC. I've been practicing my offense for sure for DC.
I think a lot of that I share. At my tournament also went pretty poorly. I played Green White Gear Hulk. I thought my deck lists made sense. I thought like just my deck choice sort of made sense, and Um, you know, in theory, Green White Gear Hulk is supposed to have a reasonable matchup against some of the prowess decks or just the Is It flavors, and also maybe the mono green landfall. So kind of in my head, it made sense why I chose my deck, but it just didn't work out that way. Took a couple of losses early and to some good players, and that's going to happen. And had a pretty short day. So, but
Well,
Watsy gave us some other good news that maybe we can talk about. Some other big announcements.
but before that,
It's true.
it's time for the mailbag.
Everyone's favorite segment.
Main phase mailbag. You got questions, we got answers. Main phase mailbag. It's the main phase mailbag. Bing. Pending
Copyright pending.
copyright.
Okay, so today's mailbag was this another one from Twitter, I think, right,
Mhm.
Doug? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So today's mailbag question is: how do you go about choosing a deck for a tournament? Where do you fall on to play what's the best position deck versus what's the best deck for you slash what you enjoy? When should you play the best deck? When, especially like when everyone's sort of targeting it, this is the biggest meta share. I expect everybody to sort of be prepared for it type deck. Where do you go? Where do you fall on some of that? And I think this is a great question, Doug.
Yeah. So I think I struggle a lot with choosing the quote unquote correct deck. Um, and there's one of the conversations I had on the super mega long odyssey back to Houston on the car ride,
Hmm.
right? Um, so I think when choosing a deck, like going forward, especially for me, I want to meet these 4 points of criteria, right? First, the deck has to be at least 66% of the best decks, right? So if we're in a three deck tier one, I want to be able to be at least two of the three best decks. So for DC, that means that I want to be able to be prowess, landfall, and or spell elementals. Uh, Criteria two, it needs to have reliable side four configurations and game plans versus decks that doesn't beat consistently and I have enough knowledge in those matchups that I can navigate those games to lead to more positive outcomes. The third one is that it cannot have a polarizing matchup into that tier one, meaning it can't lose more than 65% of those games. And then lastly, uh, I think it needs to fit a style of play that you can work with or be interesting for you to work with. Uh,
Hmm.
I feel like, especially for me and other people that I talk to, that I do better when I'm playing something that I enjoy or think something I find uh, entertaining or fascinating. Right?
Yeah, you connect
Uh,
with it a little bit.
yeah. If I have some sort of fascination or joy with the deck, I'm more likely to put work into the deck. I'm more likely to learn the play patterns. I'm more likely to put in the work that must be done to get good at the deck. Whereas if
Hmm.
I'm playing the quote unquote best deck and I find no joy in it, I'm not going to do well with it because I don't have that drive to put the work into. I think you should choose the deck that meets that criteria and is best for you, not necessarily always the best deck.
Yeah, I think it's a really tough way, so you kind of outlined a few points there, and y- I like the way that you're kind of thinking about it, trying to decide what do I should sit down and actually show up at the tournament with. How do I even begin to have that in whether internal dialogue or dialogue with your testing team or whatever. I think that's a good place, and I think there's a lot of good insight there. I kind of just it's a very loaded question. We could probably do almost a whole episode on this, I think, just because I think there is a ton of nuance and what side of the fence do you sort of land on? Do I just blindly play quote unquote the best deck? Do I play the deck that I feel most comfortable with, that I feel like maybe I enjoy kind of some of those things that you're talking about? It's really hard. I don't really have a great answer, I think is my short answer. I think I flip from both sides back and forth. You know, sometimes it's just, hey, I'm gonna blindly play the best deck because I just think that this maybe is so much further ahead. It surpasses my need or enjoyment sort of factor. Maybe sometimes it's the other way around where I don't think the gap between the perceived best deck and what I enjoy is that large. So I'll land on the I'm gonna play is it pile because that's my sort of jam. So it's really hard. Um, it's one of those things you just kind of have to be honest with yourself and really take a good look in the mirror, maybe. And also, I would say it's important to not feel like you can't get it wrong. Like, oh, I showed up at a tournament, I'm going to kick myself in the butt because I picked the wrong deck, and now I'm in that negative headspace. I think it's important to say or be aware of you can take risk and you can take a shot, and if you have a called shot and say, hey, I think this was really just the best deck, or this is the right way for me to attack this weekend. I think that's fine, and I think that's something that we kind of typically miss in a lot of this is be willing to take a shot. Be willing to get it wrong and be okay with that. But sometimes you're going to get it right too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think, especially with speaking for both of us, if I can be so candid, is
Hmm.
that we often take the safe option. We say, "Oh, this is the best deck. We're going to play the best deck," or "This is the second most played deck. It beats the best deck, so I'm going to play that."
Yeah,
But sometimes you just have to like step out of what you normally do. If you have a teammate or you believe in a deck
yeah,
and it meets those criteria that I stated earlier, then you just gotta go for it. Because like
hmm,
I've definitely had decks that weren't meta decks that met all my criteria that I stated, and I just
yeah,
didn't choose them because I was afraid to do it. Um, and then I just kicked myself in the butt 'cause I didn't give it a chance. So DC, I think I'm taking that chance, and if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I mean, there's plenty of tournaments this year. I mean, you can't win them all. Hopefully, you can't lose them all. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think at the end of the day, as long as you can not cope, you can have data and playtesting to back up that you can beat, most of the best decks, and you have dedicated game plans that you worked out with yourself or with friends on the other decks. I think you can't go wrong. And as far as it goes, like picking the best deck. Uh, Again, I usually just go with what meets that criteria. There's some formats like VV that there's not another deck that meets our criteria. It's just VV. So like,
yeah, yeah.
so that's why I like my criteria a lot because like it'll definitely reveal itself like if it's a format that you just have to play the best deck or not.
Yeah, I mean, like the DB, like you said, DB was just a
Yeah,
one deck format, so there's not a lot of um, bobbing and weaving or some other options there. Really, it was just so much
yeah,
better or so much further ahead than anything else
yeah,
that you could have played.
100%.
So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. All right, I'm dying to dive into the ban announcement. You got anything else? Yeah, I know we're still recovering, but in case people didn't notice, there was a ban announcement. Wizards of the Coast did make some changes, and they made some pretty big splashes in Modern.
Hmm. Uh, in the arms of an angel.
poor, poor
I shall
Fledge, Doug's
fly
best friend.
away. That's truly why I'm wearing black. I'm mourning the loss of my friend.
We're
Yeah.
still in mourning. Yeah. So let's just do a quick run through of kind of just start at the top, right? So standard, no changes. Any big highlights for you on standard?
I was actually kind of surprised by this. It makes sense that they wouldn't change it
Hmm.
going into like half the RC still haven't been played yet. So it kind of makes a little sense. But I think a lot of people, myself included, were wanting, you know, a ban of either like Loner Alpha Badger Mole Cub to like slow down the landfall strategies and or void strategies. And if you're going to do that, to cut something from Is It Prowess, i.e., Storm Chaser's talent, I think
Hmm.
those cards still kind of run the format. Um, and I think we'll continue to run the format in some capacity. Uh, so I'm a little, not really angry, but
On
I'm
it.
disappointed. I think they could have done a big shakeup there, but I understand the timing's probably not correct. So hopefully they'll continue to watch it
Yeah,
and make changes in the future.
I think that's the real that is what made their decision here. That's what I think that they're kind of sticking to is because we're in the middle of this RC season, because we're in the middle of things, we're just not going to make those big changes in the middle of the season. And So that's why I think they ultimately decided not to do anything. I do think I kind of agree with you that a lot of players either sort of expected or maybe wanted something. Um, even if you kind of pull some of the information that they put in the article, right? I think it's like, well, the opening line where standard's been a volatile format for 2026. Well, yeah, I mean, it really has been kind of a lot of stuff. Um, and I agree. It's just a little stale, or it's a little, I don't know. It's just missing something for me. It's just too much Cub and is it, and there's just not a lot of change. And one of the things that they talk about is some churn, but it's really not churn in my opinion. It's just the Izzet decks retooling themselves to be ready for the next weekend, or the Cub decks retooling themselves to be ready for the next weekend. The core part of it is really still there. Wells, Cub, and fill in the rest of the stuff. Same thing with, like you mentioned, like the thing you called out here with Storm Chasers talent. It's that boomerang basics, and you fill out the rest of the core from there. So it is a little disappointing.
100%. It's definitely the same play patterns are there. There's other decks that will pop up, and they'll have a good weekend. But I think ultimately there's enough tools with the amount of sets that we have that the green decks and the Izzet decks will restructure, retool for the next week. Because at
Hmm.
Cincinnati, one of the decks that really like popped out was the four color control deck. It was beating the Izzet decks and landfall decks. And I 100% think that both those decks could retool itself and have a perfect version that beats the control deck very easily. I think the control deck is very powerful,
Yep.
but does have a lot of points of interaction, uh, holes in the armor, if you will, that if you interact with on those certain
Hmm.
turns, you'd be able to beat them pretty consistently. And I think both those decks have a lot of those tools to be able to get under that deck. So I think, we'll continue having weeks that a deck pops up or 2 decks pop up that's, like, doing really well, but it's not gonna I don't think it's gonna last until we have a banning or 2. It's just those decks have a vast amount of resources. They're so consistent, they're so inherently powerful, and, not every deck can answer everything that's going on every turn of the game to keep up with those decks.
Yeah. Yeah, just as we expect the format to have tools to reshape themselves to fit the Cub and Izzet things, that also is true for the Cub and Izzet decks. They also can just reshape themselves and have those tools that we've kind of highlighted that they'll be able to, you know, bob and weave along with them format. So, I think those are going to keep kind of moving things, and it changes the speed of the format, which is another thing that they called out in the article. Is they kind of felt like the speed of the format was a little too fast right now, and I think that's a little true. But standard is where it is, and it's just going to have to live with it for now. So they did make a change in Pioneer, but Pioneer is also just not a real format.
Well
Sorry, everyone.
well, there is
Well,
hints that it
maybe
might
there's a glimmer now.
it might be a competitive format in 2027. I haven't really seen any, like,
All
reports
right.
of, like, a official announcement, just some, I believe there was some hearsay in a, WotC stream. So I don't think it's gonna be an RC format, but, something that I would like to see, and I don't know if I've already said it on the podcast, is I think they should be using the spotlight system kinda like GPs and, like, have, like, competitive
Mhm,
tournaments of different formats other than, standard, modern, limited. Like, I think it would be cool to have a
mhm.
legacy, spotlight, to have a pre-modern or pioneer in this case, even though I don't like pioneer, but or have, like, a block, format or popper or anything.
Well, we'd have to have blocks to
Well,
do that
yeah,
again, but yeah, I hear you. I mean, your point's made, right? It would be nice to have some of these other formats, these other events, to give a little bit more variety. I mean, even limited, right? Limited is still a part of the PT. It's still part of ways that you can qualify for RCs and things like that. And what we've had, I think, two
mhm.
limited spotlights or something like that. There hasn't been
I
a lot
think
of
there's
it.
gonna
So.
be much more. I mean, just looking from a money side, what Toronto had a waiting list, and then they upped it again, and then they had another waiting list on top of that.
Hmm.
I can't remember how many people it was, but it was ridiculous. Uh, wasn't it close to like
Yeah.
1,200 people?
It was quite a lot, right? But I think initially, didn't they have kind of like maybe I'm way off on this, but I thought they had a smaller venue,
Yeah,
and that kind of led to some of the
yeah,
restrictions for the player
yeah.
base. But
But
um,
all that said, the Pioneer did get a ban of Story Corey Steelcutter.
Yep. Corey Steelcutter
Yeah.
is now gone in Pioneer, so we'll see what happens there in Pioneer. You know, maybe it'll come back, and I'm not opposed to having another valuable, a valid format. You
Mhm.
know, I think that like some things you've pointed out here. It is nice to have a little bit of variety, so it's not just you know, A B back and forth, have another option
Yeah.
in there. So, and then I guess I'll call out the last kind of format we won't spend too much time talking about, which is Legacy. They did ban Undercity
Mhm.
Informant. That is now gone. So, a little bit of change there. Glad that at least WotC is paying attention to some of these formats, even if they aren't sort of on the forefront of the competitive edge. It's not standard, it's not modern. That's where most of all the competitive games are happening, or the RCs, Pro Tours, things like that. But at least they're kind of keeping those two formats under close eye. All right, everyone's favorite that we're going to talk about, modern.
Yep.
So big changes in modern. Obviously, as we've mentioned, Flage the Titan has been banned. Lotusfield banned. Violent Outburst unbanned, and Umezawa's Jitte unbanned. So where do you want to start, Doug? Obviously, let's start with our favorite red white Titan.
Yeah, we gotta pour one out for Flage. So one thing that I didn't like with the BNR announcement was that the reason why they said they banned Flage because they wanted to break up Arena, Glory, and Flage. They felt like that two card combo was very strong and kind of restricting in how Modern could progress and move forward. Uh,
Hmm.
I think that the correct answer was Arena of Glory because uh, in this current post ban modern, there's a lot of push for energy without Flage. There's a lot of push uh, for strategies like that. But I really think Flage being banned really kills Jeskai energy or Jeskai Blink, I should say, and Boros Energy because like Flage offered the energy deck a way to both add pressure to the board and be able to answer the board in rates. And without that, I think the deck's gonna start losing to mid range and aggro decks. Or with Flage, it wouldn't really lose to those decks; it would just lose the combo. So I think it's lights out. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone is going to prove me wrong. But I don't like getting rid of an entire archetypes, especially newer archetypes, when there could have been a different band that would have kept those archetypes alive.
Yeah, so to me, it's really interesting that they even considered it sort of Flage versus Arena. I'm really surprised that Arena's even in the conversation. I just can't imagine banning Arena. It doesn't really seem like the kind of card that we would even ban or even be in the discussion for banning. So I can understand wanting to reduce Boros's metagame share, right? I think that's what the
Hmm.
intent here is, that we've just consistently seen Boros at 25% roughly 25% of the metagame for the last 2 years or whatever this sort of stretch of time has been. And so I can understand WotC wanting to lower that. Let's get a little less Boros floating around and a little bit more of some of these other decks, right? I think that's what the intent with this decision is. Is this the right way to go about it? I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that they framed this all as Flage versus Arena, and at the end of the day, they settled on Flage.
Yeah, I mean the Boros deck is just losing, like you said, a lot of inevitability, and it's just going to be severely weaker to Rathos guys. So I think in this early week or two of Modern, it's going to still see play, but I think eventually it's gonna go on the wayside. But I do I do like how they said, okay, Energy had the meta share, but the win percentage was really to Amulet Titan. I really thought Amulet Titan was the tier zero deck of the format. And I really do agree with them that banning the Lotus Field was a good idea. Slowing down the deck, I do think with Lotus Field gone, the deck's going to probably move towards more of the older version of Amulet Titan, focusing more on trying to hit Titan and the Colossus, trying to win games that way, which there's ways to counter that game plan. So,
Yep.
I think the deck's going to stick around. And again, they I feel like they nuked 2 archetypes, but they're like, "We didn't wanna nuke the Amulet Titan because it's an iconic, archetype, we still wanted it to be around." But I would argue that Boros was kind of becoming iconic. It's been around for 2 to 3 years. It's been the mid-range deck of the format, so,
Mhm.
the logic's not quite there in my opinion, but I do like the Lotus Field Bands.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna touch something in Boros, or some of these other decks, you're gonna, um, unleash some old cards back into the format. I think, making a change, making, an adjustment for, Titan makes a lot of sense, and I do think that Lotus is probably just the right kind of sweet spot of the knobs to kind of twist to get to that point, and what I mean is, um the Lotus loops you can get to too fast. Lotus allowed you to have this land that made 3 mana, but also put a bunch of lands in the graveyard so that you can aftermath analyst back out and you kind of rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And I think that even Scape Shift was, a very fast tool for them to get to these points. And Lotus just sort of made it all turn too quick, too easy, and so I think it was just the kind of the right. Let's dial it back a little bit. Let's pull Titan back within kind of maybe the parameters where they want it. So, Titan's never been the most played deck, so you don't really get to see its sort of sheer dominance. But yeah, absolutely, it's probably just been the best deck, and nobody really likes to play it a lot, or there's not as much, but yeah, I'm happy to see Lotus that adjustment with Lotus. I think that's kind of the right call. But by no means does this wipe out Titan. And I think going back to Flage too, I'm not totally convinced that it wipes out Boros. Sure, it changes the deck and maybe it makes it a little bit less resilient, and you have less of that staying power. Maybe you can find that somewhere else. Maybe the deck just tries to lean in and be all sort of all in aggression and hope that you can just close games out before you have to go longer. Who knows? We'll see how things turn, but Titan will stick around. I think that one's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to disagree in this point. I think in the first couple weeks, people are gonna stick to it, but I think eventually people are gonna realize the Wrath of Skies was no natural way to rebuild after Wrath of Skies besides for sideboard cards like Legend of Roku. I think the deck's gonna eventually die, or at least be a tier two kind of deck, kind of a diehard deck.
What decks? Let me jump in and ask you a question then. So, what decks do you think are Wrath of the Sky decks? Is it just Esper Blink? Is it Goryo's? What Wrath of the Skies decks do you expect to be around a
I
lot?
mean, there could be argument that
Put you on the
there could
spot.
be argument that control can come back and be relevant in the format because Boros Energy and Flage are kind of keeping it down. Uh, I think Esper Blink it gets a major upgrade and meta share. I do think that Goryo's just also gets a large amount of meta game share. And I also think that, maybe there's a deck we haven't seen yet in a while that can play that card as well. Um, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe no other white decks pop up and it doesn't see a lot of play, and then the deck can kind of thrive. But I don't know. I'm pessimistic. It just it did it just that
Yeah.
card lets you win the mid range and aggro mirrors, and without it, it seems like you're gonna fall victim to those decks. Like I think prowess matchup against energy is now gonna be from unfavored to either 50-50 or favored because our life game doesn't matter. You might see, you know, heck, Boros Burn might come back. Flage was keeping that out of the format. Um, and like you lose the life gain in the affinity matchup when you're trying to race. Like that matchup's probably getting worse as well without Flage. There's a lot of things that Flage did for the deck that you don't really have another card to replace it, and I just think eventually it'll fall off. But you know what? If I'm proven wrong, I'm proven wrong. I would happy to be proved wrong
Yeah.
because most of that deck is foil for me. That's a lot of money. I would love to play it again.
Yeah.
But right now I'm just so focused on standard. I have so much other things I have to focus on. I just don't have the time to really put in the effort at this time. In a couple weeks, maybe I'll get a chance. But if I had a tournament to play like tonight, like later on after this podcast, I'd probably play Affinity. I think Affinity becomes the number one aggro aggressive deck to play, and definitely a deck to watch out
Mhm.
for.
Yeah, I mean, we can kind of go into some of that maybe at the end here if we've got a little bit of time, talk about some where the metagame is moving and maybe some decks and things to think about. But I'm just not convinced that the existence of Wrath of the Skies is oh well now Boros can't exist anymore. Like we were Boros was already getting Wrath of the Skies, and I get it, I get it. I agree that Flage was there to pick you up and save you in a lot of those spots, but I don't think that just because the existence of Wrath of the Skies, it
Mhm.
can't be there. And you know, I'm I'm trying to do that, with a little bit of caution, right? Obviously, I am a Boros fan as just as much as you are, and I want that deck to be able to stick around. But I think we could maybe there's some stuff out there. Who knows? We've tried different things like extraction specialist, right? That's the streets and new competitive rare that get
Mhm.
something out of the graveyard, do drop cure, get things out of the graveyard back into play. You could go back to some of these kind of funny things. Maybe there's just some other late game engines or some other things that we can find
Yeah.
that kind of prop up in those spots. Or again, maybe it's hey, we're not going to play for the late game anymore. We're just going to try to out pressure you. We're going to close out games faster with some other mechanism.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see kind of where
Yeah.
Boros ends
When
up settling.
standard season is done these next 2 or 3 weeks, there's two things.
We're
Yeah,
gonna
there's
have a
two
lot of
things that
fun.
really pop into my mind. Like you said, kind of an all-in version, maybe even more aggressive with more one drops and like more synergies at the 1 to 2 drop position. Another thing that naturally pops in my head is like Mardu having Omnixilus as a late game engine that really works really well with the Johnny that we've seen in the past and gives
Mhm.
you access to Bowmasters, which works really well. Bombardment and Thoughtseize and other discard outlets to fight the combo decks. So maybe we'll see that. Also, Chthonian Nightmare is a pretty good value engine that can help you do some disgusting
Mhm.
things when paired with the Johnny. So I don't know. Maybe they'll go back to like a Mardu sack kind of thing, like they did the early stages of Modern Horizons 3. Modern,
And
one of the more exciting things is some of the unbans.
yeah, last thing on just like to kind of close out the idea with Boros. And that's what Watsy said in the article, right? They wanted to not just be Boros and just be red white because Arena and the Flage combo is there, right? Let's expand what this shell can use, whether it's adding another color, blue or black that have happened over times, right? We've had some Jeskai stuff with the Mockingbird. We've had black, like you mentioned, with Cathodian Nightmare and things like that. So hopefully this can open the door and we'll see where that takes Boros from here instead of just always being, all right, well, I'm locked
Mhm.
into red white and there's no reason to go
Yeah,
anywhere else. Yeah, the unbans are definitely exciting. Go ahead, Des.
exciting or fear nightmare inducing.
Well, I think one of them's fun, and I think the other one is I think people are maybe we'll have a difference of opinion here too. I think people are freaking out a little bit, but I've got kind of one big thing I think that we're not thinking about maybe, and that's going to save us, or at least that's the hope.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm dead wrong.
So yeah,
So
the unbanning.
yeah, unbanning is in case we did not mention it, we did get the unban of Violent Outbursts and the unban of Umezawa's Jitte. Where do you want to start, Doug?
Um, First of all, to people who may be new to modern or in the last year or two, Violent Burst was banned about 2 years ago, due to its
Yeah,
ability to cast Living End or cast
something
Crashing
footballs.
Footballs. Yeah, so yeah. So Violent Outburst uh, really gave those decks a lot of edge to cast Crashing Footfalls and Living End at instant speed with Force Negation backup. So really, their plan was when banning it was to make those decks not as powerful because it was kind of hard to be able to interact with them when they had free spells. So they unbanned it
Yeah.
recently. They were citing that there were more ways to fight the Cascade effect, i.e., Consign Memory and Vexing Bobble. Um, so
Hmm.
with the Violent Outbursts, Living End definitely gets a boost, and Rhinos might be a deck again. My only concern is that, like, yes, there are ways to counter it, but there's also a plethora, myriad, a truckload of free spells in the format that allow this deck to kind of circumvent those kind of safety measures. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I'm very pessimistic as well. Sorry, I've been pessimistic all episode. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you think so, huh? I hadn't noticed. I mean, this is maybe
I've been
first time
very
I've
negative
noticed.
this episode. I apologize. Uh,
That's okay. I'll be the other side of the coin
so
here.
I think that this has the potential to take over the format. Again, time will tell. But my knee jerk reaction is, oh, spaghetti-o. Uh,
I do think that your fear is a little justified, right? The last time we had Violent Outburst, it was all over the format, right? There was a ton of the Crashing Football decks making Rhinos, and there was a ton of the Living In deck, right? Those are things that we can look back at as somebody who's been playing Modern for a while and say, okay, we did have a lot of this. You know, why are we going back here, right? We determined that it was worth a ban last time, and all of a sudden, doesn't really look like the landscape has changed too much. I do think consigned to memory is a big, big tool, big
hmm.
weapon to fight that stuff, and that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier. Um, we didn't have that last time, right? Modern Horizons 3 came out just after that ban occurred. So was that, I don't know, mid 2024, I think is memory serves when MH3 came out. And so that's when we got it, consigned to memory. And now that that's here, I do think that that's going to be a big way for us to push back. And I think there's also a lot of consigned to memory decks that we do have access to, or maybe we'll have more and more decks sort of um, adopting access to blue mana so that you can have the consign. I do think it's a little annoying that we're sort of pushing every deck to be a consigned to memory deck. That's not really creating diversity, and that was kind of the whole point of banning Flage in the first place, was to kind of give us some more diversity. Not 25% of the room needs to be Boros, but now all of a sudden, 25% or more of the room is some sort of consigned deck. I don't really like that direction, but at least the tool to fight it is there,
Yeah, but
maybe.
I think it's just gonna end up the play patterns, end step, violent outburst, you have the consign, untap Charlotte's Agent. Like, are you gonna hold up 2 to 3 mana every turn to stop that play interaction?
Sure.
I just think that these decks are gonna find a version that can beat it. Like, my first, like, knee-jerk reaction is, like, domain Rhinos with, like, a secondary game plan with Scion and Leyline, and just, like, Teferi to stop, the consigns as well, and, it's just gonna be a nightmare. But again,
Yeah.
it's pessimistic Doug today. It's not enthusiastic. Screaming into the microphone, Doug. Um, I just think that there's just so many resources for it to fight it. And the non-blue decks, like they're gonna have to play more vaccine baubles. They're gonna have to play like things like Chalice of Void, Engineer Explosives, that kind of stuff. If Rhinos is the thing, um, and the Living Index and the Rhinos decks also have access to even more free elementals and wistfulness to kind of deal with Vexing Bobble, and it just sounds terrible. And you're like, well, Living End, you could play Endurance. Well, they have subtleties, and they can endurance themselves. They can have this, other game plan of this elementals kill you with good interaction. It's just this is so many. It's just oh, uh,
Yeah, I mean, look, I get it. I get it. It sounds scary, but just as many tools as they have, you have to fight back to them, right? Whether it's Drannith Magistrate, Vexing Bauble, what's the Lavinia that counters the spells if they didn't spend mana to cast them? I agree that is pushing more and more of what the tools that we want to fight these Cascade decks. It pushes me more and more into blue, right? Now I need to have Force Negation. Now I need to have Consign. Now I have to have these 2 in 1 mana plays because when you get to that critical turn 3 when they're trying to cast their Cascades build, now all of a sudden I need to leave mana up. So you've got this weird tension. All right, I totally get that that's there. What did I do on turn 1? What I do on turn 2? Voice of Victory is another good tool though that we could talk about as far as violent outbursts. Right, I put my Voice of Victory into play. Now you're under the gun. You've got to have subtlety, or you can't line up your play the way you want it. I agree it looks a little scary, but there is some counterplay there. There are some options. But yeah, I agree this kind of pushes more and more the format maybe, and maybe this is a bigger point, and maybe this is something we'll do a little more deeper dive on, is it does seem like subtlety gets way more important. Voice of Victory gets way more important. Force of Negation gets way more important. There's so many of these consign, right? I can't leave home without my deck that casts consign, right? What deck am I lining up to play that doesn't have access to these? Because you need a good reason to be able to play a deck that doesn't have access to this stuff, and that's maybe a bigger problem. Because the whole point of the bans or none bans was to create maybe some diversity, and it feels a little bit more restrictive, and that's maybe where my pessimism
Yeah, we're
is
both
found.
pessimistic now. Huzzah! We're the depression podcast.
Yay.
No, I see. I 100% agree. I think that like one of the things we said was we wanted creature decks to be more prevalent. So that's another reason why Phage may have been banned. But if you're putting us into a format where you need to have zero mana or heart or ways to interact with the stack in a meaningful way, that's either zero mana, free spells, or one mana with a way to replicate. Like that just pushes creature decks out of the format, kind of, because like they're not going to be able to interact in that way. They're going to have stack interaction, and like we said previously,
Mhm.
I think those decks are very well equipped to deal with stack interaction, like the interaction on the board.
Yeah, I mean, we could see that the creature decks really just turn into like these creature combo decks, right? It does seem like we're maybe moving a little away from combat and just attacking, right? A lot of the decks that did that well for us now taking a big hit, and maybe they're going to take a back seat. Um, so now all of a sudden you need to either have some sort of combo yourself so that when you can race the living in the rhinos, right? Okay, who cares? You made a couple of 4/4s, but I'm doing this creature combo. Think Yawgmoth or something, some things like that have been around in the past for modern. Maybe that's where we see creatures happening, but that's not the same. That's not creature combat. I'm not attacking and blocking. All of that is lost. Go find that in standard, I
Yeah,
guess.
I have a fear that, like you just said, it's going to be a lot of blue control decks or blue tempo decks with free spells and cheap interaction, and also combo. And if that's the route we're heading, then this was a disaster. Um, and that's kind of
Hmm.
what I fear. So, I mean, maybe I'm just being, or maybe I'm just overreacting. Maybe I'm just, um, it's
That's
it's
Cincinnati talking. You're back in
it's the
Texas, okay?
Ohio talking. No, no shade,
Yeah.
Ohio. No shade.
Yeah,
No,
still love you
we don't
guys
want
out
no
there,
trouble.
but I'm happy to be
James
I'm
Harden
happy to be home.
still will break my ankles from Ohio. Um, but going into that, like so the other card they unbanned was Umezawa Jitte, and like their whole reasoning was they wanted future decks to be more relevant. But Violent Outburst
Mhm.
is doing the exact opposite. Like I don't think GTA is going to see play in the first place.
Yeah.
It's two mana to equip. It seems kind of slow. It's kind of one of those cards that needs combat to be a focus of the format to be good. And really, the
Yeah.
combat really wasn't the focus to begin with. The best, like you said, the one of the best combat decks, Energy, kind of got nerfed. So will we get combat in modern? I don't think so. So if we don't, then
Yeah.
it's not going to see any play. And even if we did, I think it's a little too slow with how the format is. So I think it's a very safe unban. I don't think it's going to have a big impact unless a new card gets spoiled. I even see some of the people who like hammer like disgruntled elks like we're not playing that card. So if they're not playing that
Right,
card, if the
right.
Stoneforge Mystic deck of the format is not playing that card, who is?
I agree. This is one of the ones we sort of line up on, right? I'm not really expecting to see a lot out of Jit. Hey, I'm happy it's finally unbanned. Woo, woo, woo. We've, longtime Magic players is a card that people find and love and like and have missed for whatever reasons. But I'm not too optimistic about its place in modern going forward. I just don't really see a role that it can carve out. I'm not really sure. Like you said, if it's not going in the Stoneforge Mystic decks, where is it going to land? So people are talking about it coming into Boros because we're a deck that attacks and blocks, and therefore we can use the Jit. But who is it good against? What is it doing? Is it providing enough? I just think that's where it's really missing. So, this has been something that people have talked about for a long time, that this has been a safe ban. Why is it even still on the ban list? You could put it back into modern and it won't even see anything. And that's kind of where I fall with it. I just think this was finally I don't know, fan service. Here's the beloved card back, great. But what is it
Yeah,
really
it feels
doing?
like a Splinter Twin unban over the Stoneforge Mystic unban of recent past. It was a very safe
Hmm.
unban, and it's not going to see play. Again, if somehow Violent Outburst is the total opposite of the format, and we become a like creature heavy, combat heavy format. I can see JT being a good sideboard option. Um, but
Mhm.
pessimism,
Yeah, I just don't see it either, you know?
yeah,
This is a long line. This sort of falls in line with a series of cards WotC has gone back through as they're sort of combing through the ban list and trying to find something that we can unban for the fans. You know, Jace the Mind Sculptor,
yeah.
Stoneforge Mystic. These have been safe and fun. You know, for some more, I don't know, maybe casual play or just fans of Magic that maybe I'm not seeing where it's going to shine, but that's kind of where I'm
I
looking
mean,
at Jit
I
right now
would
at.
I would love it if like 2 months from now someone has this clip and they're like, these guys were done. I would love that. If we're totally wrong
Yeah.
and like the total opposite of what we thought was gonna happen happens, I would be ecstatic. I would be jumping. You know what? If that happens, I'll do the jig on Twitter. Or I'll do something. I'll do like a funny TikTok dance or
Yeah.
something. But I just don't think that's gonna. I don't think that's gonna happen. I think they they clearly outlined where they wanted the format to go, and I think they made the wrong decisions in doing so. Um, I think the Flage ban's fine. I think it's like a 5 out of 10. The Lotus Field ban I think was a 10 out of 10. GTA unban was 10 out of 10. I think the Violent
Mhm.
Outburst is like a 3 out of 10. The unban, I think it's just I don't like. I
Yeah.
think I don't like where Modern's going to be heading. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully, we're super wrong, and I have to do a TikTok dance eventually. It'll be a more embarrassing one in 2 months, most likely. But we'll see.
So one of the things they've called out is, and I've seen some discourse on this too, was um uh hey, we took a risk here. We understand that we're taking a risk here with violent outbursts. We've obviously had it on the ban list. We're, unbanning it now. But it sounds like maybe that they're going to keep a close eye on it and they're willing to put it back on the ban list. Do you like this sort of risky approach here? Let's take it off. Let's see what happens. Let's put it back out in the wild and see what the Magic players do with it. Do you like this sort of approach? I think I kind of already know your pessimism answer here that we probably don't want to do this, but I kind of like WotC taking some chances. What do you think from that sort of
I think
perspective?
it's an appropriate time to do so because like the RCs are a couple months away. So
Yeah.
getting this done now rather than right before an RC is pretty huge. So if they're gonna do it, doing it now makes total sense and probably is a good approach.
Hmm.
Um, I personally would have rather them, in-house tested it first more, had more time to go through it. Because if they're saying themselves that it's risky, like, that to me shows that they really haven't put a lot of, uh, uh, play testing through, a lot of, like, games in. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm dead wrong, but I don't know, that seems like they're unsure what's gonna happen, but if they did this
Yeah.
before an RC,
I-
I would have a pitchfork and a torch and be screaming into the sky, like, "Why are you doing this right before a Pro Tour qualifying event?" But during RCQ season, I think it's relatively fine to do it now. So if they're gonna do it, do it now.
What's the format for the next Pro Tour? Isn't it modern? Doesn't this adjust what's happening
Yeah,
for Amsterdam,
but
right?
that's about
Am I
I
crazy?
believe it's around 2-ish months. It's in, I think,
Yeah, I mean, we've got some time to
yeah,
kind of let the format digest and for players to adapt to that. But I think this is about as much of a window lead time that they're going to be able to do for this. So I agree that this is kind of probably the best window, the best opportunity to do that. And if they're willing to Golgari Grave Troll this and put it right back on the ban list, I guess I'm okay with that. It is a little pulling the player base back and forth a little bit. I kind of maybe don't love that perspective, but I do kind of generally like them willing to take some risks and
yeah,
make some changes. So, I think at the end of the day, I'd rather see fewer cards on the ban list versus more cards on the ban list, right? Like let the tools, let the players, work with what we have and see where that goes, and then only step in when we can't really
yeah.
fix
I
the
mean,
format.
I do like them giving us player autonomy here, giving us a chance to stretch
Hmm.
like our muscles. But I also think that modern's one
Yeah.
of those formats that we said in previous episodes is kind of a copy cutter. format when played online. So I don't know how much people are going to innovate. Hopefully, people innovate their minds off, but we could see a world where we have like another Nadu Pro Tour. That's, I mean, that is a
Yeah.
possibility.
Well, I mean, that was a problem for some different reasons, but yeah, I mean, we could see where one of these decks really just takes up a large percentage of the metagame there. So okay, so that was the bans and unbans. Does we kind of touched on a good amount of this already, some of the decks, some of the winners and losers. You want to kind of recap some of that really quick before we get out of here?
Yeah, I definitely think there's a lot of things worthy of trying now that Flage is gone. One of those things that really pops in my head, I
Hmm.
think Demir Frog slash Murktide gets a real shot in the arm. I thought Flage was one of those cards that the
Hmm.
deck kind of had a hard time dealing with and had to put a lot of main deck considerations forward to fight Flage. Without Flage in the format, I think we could see like a Frog deck that's pretty good against like Cascade decks and combo decks that can also apply pressure through Frog. So maybe that could pop up as a good front runner going into the format. Uh, Prowess was also another deck that kind of was kind of being pushed out by Flage, and another deck that could be good against combo decks and like fast Cascade decks. So that deck could be a good winner. Um, the Eldrazi Blood Chief combo deck was another deck that kind of struggled, that had a very bad win rate against Jeskai Blink and Boros Energy that might pop up with the banning. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, the main two, Living End and Rhinos. Living End was already like a tier 1.5 deck, already winning tournaments. Uh, our teammate Jacob Koshak lost the finals of PTQ with Living End, like a mid-range version of Living End. Jody Keith, a acquaintance of the team, won that same PTQ, won a bunch of other tournaments with Living End, top eight on a burden with it. So that deck was already a known quantity and like pretty well placed in the meta, and it just got a humongous power boost. So I could see that deck being a tier 1 deck going forward. And Rhinos, if I don't know how it's going to be, I think it'll be a tier 1.5 deck. Maybe that part of the Violent Outburst ban that didn't meet the test of times. But I definitely think Levian's going to be huge. Um, as far as losers, there's not enough really data. There's not enough information to really say what's going to lose. Um, I almost thought that Ritual would be the Simic Ritual or Sultai Ritual deck would have been a big winner of this banning, but like
Hmm.
its main like food source was the Amulet Titan deck, and if the Amulet Titan deck gets less play, does like Ritual see less play? I mean, sure, it lost a bad matchup in Boros Energy, but its worst matchup, the Affinity deck, still exists. So like your absolute worst matchup is still there, and one of your best matchups might see a downtick. So it might. I'm still kind of iffy to play Ritual. And then the combo decks of Belcher and Neoform were kind of like more glass cannony kind of combo decks that really preyed on energy. And if that deck's gone, I can see those meta shares kind of going down because those decks kind of struggle against the other blue base combo decks.
Yeah, it's hard to really speculate. Of course, what definitely will be a winner, what's definitely a loser. I do think it's really interesting, and kind of the homework assignment I would give everybody is to think what happens as this big chunk of the metagame maybe drops out or slowly starts to drop away, i.e. Boros. I like you said, I do think Frog could be a big winner. That was a deck that I think kind of did struggle with Boros and them getting on the board too fast and too wide, too quick for, your one fatal push to really kind of clean up a lot of the threats that Boros is presenting. So Frog and also having access to all the blue cards that we've kind of talked about, consign, force, subtlety, that seems like a really nice place to be, whether you're Goryo's and or you're just blue black frog or something like that. I think that's pretty interesting. Prowess, loses is kind of one of its natural predators, i.e., Boros. Affinity, still hanging out, doing stuff. Goryo's, like I mentioned there with Frog, could be a thing. Storm is something we haven't talked too much about. I don't know that Storm really cared too much about Boros, right? It wasn't really, it's probably a good matchup for them,
Yeah.
is probably the best way to sort of summarize that. So does Storm losing a good matchup mean anything for them? I don't know. Maybe actually Storm is actually secretly a loser from this because if we have this uptick in force negation, blue cards, counter spells, things that don't let you play spells for free for somehow, whatever that looks like. Maybe Storm is actually secretly a
Yeah.
loser from this ban, as we sort of move to more of a focused combo type meta, and people are going to be more
Yeah.
prepared for combo. I.e., Storm takes a little
Yeah.
bit of a loss here. Same thing with maybe Belcher. Belcher kind of um, doesn't quite have this matchup that it can kind of beat up on because it's
Well,
soft as a
Storm
combo.
had like other good matchups, but I think it's very interesting that
Mhm.
if what we think is going to happen does happen, if there's more consigns, more counter spells, and also like if Living End pops off as one of the best decks, there might be more incidental graveyard hate, and all those cards really just beat up on Storm. So if all those decks are fighting on all those axes. Storm is a big loser in that fact because it's not as resilient as the other decks. They don't have as many tools. Uh, so yeah, I think Storm could be a loser from this. It's
Yeah,
also one of those decks that like in the last couple of years, whenever there's a modern pro tour, its win rate was pretty low. Um,
yeah. I think when you're ready for it, it's one of those decks that you can just really, all right, I've got my targets locked on it. There are the
yeah,
right tools there. We know what those tools are. We know how to deploy those against Storm. So, it's just that when the so many of your resources, okay, you're like, I'm looking at my deck. I need so many of these tools to fight Boros. Now that I don't need quite as many of my sideboard cards to do that, I can focus those sideboard cards elsewhere. Maybe that's where we see a little bit of shift in churn. So it's definitely going to be fun. I'm excited to get into modern and really hash out some of this. But like you've mentioned, we've got DC on the horizons here, and that's where our standard focus is really at. And so that's kind of where we're going to keep our heads locked into for now. But it's going to be fun to see what ends up happening here
yeah.
with modern.
Honestly, we could spend another hour talking about like different like theoretical decks that could rise and fall because of this. Uh, One other deck
Yeah.
that I kind of wanted to shout out before we close it out here was I think Esper Blink gets kind of a boost. I think a lot of people who like that play style all those people who are playing just Sky Blink might switch to Esper. I do
Hmm.
think Esper is kind of like a nice mid range strategy that can also like punish a lot of the combo decks. And it was a deck that historically could struggle against Titan. So with Titan, if Titan takes a step back, like we think it might, from tier 0 to tier 1.5, or even tier 2, that could definitely pop up as a definitely a deck to look out for. Um, but to anyone who's not going to DC, I implore you to just test whatever you want.
Yeah.
Test.
Try something
Play
out.
mill. Energy's gone. Play your crabs. Burn sickles. Dust the lava spikes. The
You're
flage is
back.
gone. Try it out. Tell me
Yeah.
how it does.
Yeah.
Like I think in the next 2 weeks you can try whatever you want, and kind of see what
Yeah.
sticks. Um, so I mean, please just hit us with what you like, in the comments. Like,
Yeah. Let us know. For sure. I think that's a great idea. Like, go out there and try some stuff. You know, break out your pet deck that you haven't been able to play in a while. Try it out. Let us know. Tell us what's happening out there. Go do some
yeah, heck,
exploring.
some of you Stone Forge Mystic lovers, try Cheat. Just try old steel stone like blue white or Jeskai or whatever Stoneforge deck. Go crazy. Just go. The next 2 weeks are going to be super fun for modern. If you don't have a big standard RC coming up, then I implore you just get out there, get in the trenches, get cooking. I think these next two
Heck yeah.
weeks, I'm actually jealous that I don't get to like just play this new format for the next 2 weeks. I have to do my homework while everyone else is playing outside. It's summertime and
Yes.
everyone is playing outside and at the pool, and I'm in summer school just working,
Yep.
playing like, how do I play prowess? How do I play against prowess? And everyone's like, oh, look at me, I'm casting Stoneforge Mystic. Hooray! And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
gonna be a lot of fun out there, and we'll miss a little bit of it, but hopefully we get some people that write in or let us know
Yeah.
what's happening and
Yeah.
how much fun they're having.
I don't know. Maybe we'll get some free time. Maybe we'll do like a video too of like some deck ideas that might be freed.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe on that's playable again.
Ooh, no, no,
That's
no, no, no. Don't say that.
dude, that's my favorite card. I would love if an Omnath deck was playable again. It's probably not, but I mean, you know what? You know what? I might
Try
play
it out.
League of Omnath after this podcast.
Everyone gets a hall pass.
Oh,
Go try it
I don't
out.
know.
Go try it out.
Oh
You
no,
get a hall
not,
pass. Everybody gets. You
I
get a
don't know
hall
if you can
pass. You get a
say
hall pass.
everyone gets a hall pass. So once the wife comes in listening to the podcast, like, what are these guys saying?
Go play a fun
Yeah,
modern deck. Try it out.
that's your
That's
yeah,
your
it's your
homework.
homework.
All
It's your
right.
second main phase homework.
All right. Well, let's get out of here, Doug. Let's wrap up and let the people tell them. Thank you so much for coming in and joining us. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for sticking around and listening.
Yeah, and don't forget to leave your questions for the mailbag in the comments below, or you can add us on Twitter. You can add the Team Main Phase Twitter. Any way you want to give us questions. I prefer if it was in the comments of the video, but you know, I'll figure
Yeah,
it out. I'll
love that.
find it. I really loved this one. I thought I definitely want more like thought provoking questions like that. I think it'd behoove us as Magic players to kind of explain our process so we can see the holes in our process, what works, what doesn't. Because like when thinking about this question, I thought
Hmm.
I did a lot of inward searching and talked to a lot of teammates, and I think I kind of grew from answering this question. So I appreciate y'all leaving these questions.
Yeah.
I want to keep answering them. I want to keep growing with you guys, our audience.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Appreciate you being here. We really do love it. Thank you so much. And I guess we can't forget to mention we can't do this without our wonderful sponsors. So again, thank you so much for the Mana Vault and Kangaroo Tales being there. Thank you, Team Main Phase, and thank you all of you beautiful people out there. See you next time. Have fun.